So this is Carrie Cassidy, and today is Wednesday, January 13th, 2010. And I'm here with Michael Stratts. And other than that, I am not even sure what we're going to be talking about, so I'm just going to let you run with it, Michael.
Okay, Carrie, thank you very much. It's certainly great to be with you today. What I've brought here is the historical legacy of the military-industrial complex, and we're going to be considering three different programs today. We're going to be talking about black programs. That's any program that has less than 5% congressional oversight. We're going to be talking about deep black programs. The third and final category is what's called a USAP, or Unacknowledged Special Access Program. If you work in one of those projects and the president asks you for specific details regarding that program, your mandatory reply is to be, Mr. President, no such project exists. So that's a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. This is the Boeing Phantom Works Bird of Prey. This was declassified October 2002 under the Bush administration. This is the first aircraft to use a single-piece composite aircraft construction in conjunction with 3D virtual reality design. You can see here there's practically no seams associated with the Boeing Phantom Works Bird of Prey. Very low radar cross-section. 67 test flights were made between 1992 and 1998. And you can see here, this aircraft is now on display at the Air Force Museum, Dayton, Ohio. Very low radar cross-section. So this is the Boeing Phantom Works Bird of Prey. You can see here, this is only the only seam in the entire aircraft is right in this location.
Cool.
Currently hanging above an aircraft called Tacit Blue in the Air Force Museum, Dayton, Ohio. So now we're moving on to the A-12 Avenger II. This was a joint General Dynamics McDonnell Douglas program, which was used as a high-altitude, all-weather interceptor designed to replace the A-6 Intruder. What's interesting about this, Carrie, is by 1991, our really good friend Dick Cheney canceled this project at the cost of $5 billion to taxpayers, and we have absolutely nothing to show for the A-12 Avenger II. So I try to make the point, is this a mismanagement of funding? Is there something else we could have spent our money on for all that? We've got bridges, we've got the inner working of structures of the roads that are breaking down, yet we're spending billions on these programs, have nothing to show for it. Moving on to the electrochromic panels, we now have daytime stealth technology. During Desert Storm, we had the F-117A, which struck Baghdad during nighttime operations. Now, we have the technology to strike during the day with the electrochromic panels. What they're doing here is they're taking a view of what's in back or the bottom surface of the aircraft, and they're electronically transferring up to the top, thereby making it blend in with the background, essentially totally making it invisible. So we now can do that during the daytime. Sneaky Pete.
Is this in the public domain, that part?
Yeah, this is in the public domain. Electrochromic panels are within the public domain. Absolutely, absolutely.
That's interesting.
Low altitude interceptor called the Sneaky Pete aircraft. We'll move on here, a couple of Bird of Prey. We have the only original sketch of Lockheed Senior Peg. Got this from the senior project design engineer who worked under Ben Rich. Now, Ben Rich was the Lockheed Skunk Works president who took over the reins of the Skunk Works back in 1975 from Kelly Johnson. And you'll notice here on this sketch that this is a overgrown F-117A with 4 turbojet engines buried inside the fuselage with kind of an inverted forward swept V-tail arrangement, low radar cross-section. Here you can see what Senior Peg actually looked like. Approximately 152 feet wingspan, and they would have won the contract if Northrop did not win the contract. So this was Lockheed's version of the ATB, the Advanced Technology Bomber. A different version had a tail boom here with an inverted V-tail swept arrangement. Now, we've heard these reports over the years of these different large, very large TBMs, or tunnel boring machines, over 40 feet in diameter. We've heard reports of nuclear power tunnel boring machines boring 40 to 45 foot diameter holes all around the remote test site in Nevada. Also connecting Air Force Plant 42 Palmdale to Edwards North Base Complex, and it's incredible what we're doing with black budget funding within the military-industrial complex. Now, I got this sketch from a gentleman who worked for General Electric for over 30 years, and he said back in 1992 he was part of a team to tow a B-52 in an underground tunnel from Air Force Plant 42 Palmdale to Edwards North Base Complex, and he said that there was an X-20 dinosaur-looking aircraft, North American Aviation X-20 dinosaur-looking aircraft, on the upper spine of the B-52. However, what was interesting is when he was going through this tunnel, he said that there were 4 connecting shafts which were connected to the shaft that he was in, and he said that one shaft was twice as big as the shaft he was in, and you could put 2 B-52s side by side and still have 6 feet on either wingtip. That's just incredible. That's a fantastic technology, and it's going on now. It's being done. We do have the reports. Tacit Blue. This is the Tacit Blue technology demonstrator. This is Northrop, first flight 1982, was retired 1985. Between 1985 and 1996, this program was completely black, absolutely black. This was the first aircraft to use a quad redundant fly-by-wire flight control system with a side scanning radar. It's the same type system used on the Northrop B-2 stealth bomber. You can see they called it the Whale. It's also called the flying bathtub, or also the flying snow shovel. This is the very only original photograph showing the interior cockpit of Tacit Blue. Very arcane dinosaur avionics. So this is vintage 1982. Again, Tacit Blue technology demonstrator. Now this is an interesting story behind this. 1988 Honda Civic release commercial for the Honda Civic. Honda built a 90% scale sheet metal mock-up of the Honda Stealth Bomber. This is after it was declassified November 22nd, 1988. The windshield for this mock-up is the rear window for a vintage Corvette. So you can see that this is kind of a cut and paste thing they put together out of sheet metal, about 90% scale. And when they finally aired this commercial on television, the phones at the Pentagon blew up because they had almost nailed the exact configuration of the B-2 stealth bomber before it came out. Just a fantastic storyline. Here you see we've got $2.3 billion per each B-2. They're worth more than their own weight in gold. Yet we've got schools breaking down, we've got people on the streets that we could help. Is there a mismanagement of funding? We're definitely going to consider it. Inside the assembly plant, you can see the B-2 being assembled here. Again, worth more than its own weight in gold. This I call the $10 billion photograph. Since every B-2 is $2.3 billion per aircraft, you've got 4 B-2s here being assembled. That's approximately $10 billion right there. Good shot of the Honda Stealth Bomber mock-up.
Okay, before you continue, can you say a little bit about where you get this information that you're talking about?
I've talked to test pilots, I've talked to engineers, I've done the research within the AIAA article libraries, I've gone to different aerospace centers, and that's how I've done it. I've just really tried very hard to maintain this historical legacy, because a number of these programs are completely black, they're unacknowledged, and for instance the Have Blue, which first flew in 1977 under the Carter administration, both of those aircraft have been buried at the remote test site, never to be seen by human eyes again. So someone needs to go around and document this history, or we will never know what we bought and paid for with our own tax dollars. That's why I'm doing what we're doing.
Okay, and you have a special interest in, in aircraft. I mean, you obviously do. Are you a pilot yourself?
I am a private pilot, and I have an interest in classified black budget aircraft with no congressional oversight. That's really my interest.
Okay.
That's really my interest. Now this is an interesting illustration here. I challenge anyone to find me a photograph of the Northrop B-2 stealth bomber with the engine access panels removed. This is about the closest we can get. There is something going on within the B-2 that they won't talk about. There absolutely is, and I'll explain here. U.S. Air Force insignia, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Air Material Command. Now, this is an official Wright-Patterson Air Force Base insignia here, and inside this insignia, you will see 3 classified aircraft embedded inside. We've got the B-2 stealth bomber right here. We've got the F-117 right here, and we've got something called the F-100 Sentinel right in the center. So in their own insignia, they're telling us that they have other aircraft going on here. Washington Post, unraveling stealth black world. Questions of cost and mission arise amid debate over secrecy. Now this is interesting here. Northrop B-2 stealth bomber electrogravitic propulsion system, March 9th, 1992. So I don't want people to think that I'm just making this up. I provided the reference material where you can get this information. So March 9th, 1992, Aviation Week Space Technology talked about how the B-2 electrically charges the leading edge of the wing to reduce the radar cross signature, and then electrically charges the exhaust gases to reduce the infrared signature. Now what's interesting, when you do that, according to the engineers at Northrop, definitely within this article, they said that when you do this process via 1968 report from Northrop, there is a resultant drag coefficient reduction by up to 60%. That is just absolutely staggering if you can think about the implications of what that means. How much would this technology be worth to the commercial airline industry, to United Airlines, to American Airlines? What would they pay for a technology that could reduce their fuel consumption by up to 60%? It would be worth billions, but yet it's not being released into the public domain. It's a classified technology. What also is interesting is when you electrically charge the leading edge and you negatively charge the trailing edge, you set up something called a gravity wave, where there's a gravity well in front of the vehicle, a gravity hill in back of the vehicle, so you can essentially turn off the engines on this craft. It will turn into an over Unity device, and it will ride its own wave with almost unlimited range. So that's, and again, we've got the patents for it. It operates on the principles of high voltage electricity in conjunction with the T. Townsend Brown effect. We've got the poor man's stealth technology, ionized plasma used in MiGs, used in some of our American aircraft, U.S. patent number 5,420,588. So again, we see the historical legacy of that type technology. This is the different antenna sections that are embedded on the leading edge of the Northrop B-2 stealth bomber, patent number 4,989,006. Now, this is very important. Between 1982 and 1989, there were over 25,000 eyewitnesses in the Hudson Valley who reported a very gigantic boomerang mantis-shaped craft with a triangle trailing edge, very grayish dark black, almost completely inky black, hovering, flying silently. But what was interesting here is what was reported was identical to the original Northrop B-2 stealth bomber. It had a single sawtooth trailing edge. But eyewitnesses reported that the bottom surface of this vehicle had translucent panels that you could see up inside the beam structure, the I-beam, the truss and tube members. So I asked the question, why in the world would you need translucent panels on the bottom of this vehicle? Well, it's simple. If you're landing VTOL like a helicopter, you would need to see your landing area. So that's perhaps why this vehicle had the translucent panels. Over 25,000 eyewitnesses. So here you see back in 1983 what the original B-2 looked like. Now at the cost of taxpayers, at the end of 1983, they changed the B-2 to this configuration right here. So what may have explained the Hudson Valley sightings was a much more deep black classified version of the B-2 that has not been released. Here's what some of them reported: multiple different lighting patterns, very unusual manta ray boomerang shaped.
Are these artist mock-ups?
This is an illustration, conceptual illustration, yes. Okay. Computer generated forensic composite illustration. Interesting report here, Detroit Free Press. We've got the actual article here. Detroit Free Press, this is February 8th, 1987. Secret ledger hides military projects. Pentagon black budget has tripled under Reagan administration. Now, if you look at this chart, fiscal year spending in billions, procurement funding. For fiscal year 1988, we had $25 billion for education. We had $26 billion for agriculture. The Pentagon's black budget was $35 billion. Now, of which the Air Force procurement funding was $51.1 billion, of which $19.1 billion was classified for the Air Force budget procurement back in 1988. Now, there is some information to suggest that currently, by 2010, which is now, the black budget is well over $400 billion per year. Just an incredible amount of money with no congressional oversight, no public scrutiny whatsoever. Security clearance classification chart. We're going to talk about that here. If you look at the bottom.
Okay, I've seen this before,
yes,
actually.
Start at the bottom here. We've got restricted, we've got confidential, then we've got secret, we've got top secret, we've got SCI, that's Special Compartmented Information. We've got USAP, Unacknowledged Special Access Program. Above that, we've got 28 levels of top secret crypto. The President is cleared for level 17. Those are the GO codes, or the nuclear launch codes. And then above that, there are 10 levels of top secret above crypto with cosmic and majestic. So, in point of fact, if you see here, the President is actually near the bottom of the classification chart, and that's why he is not briefed on a number of programs within the military-industrial complex. So if Obama is asked about the truth about UFOs, the truth about very black classified programs, he can rightfully say that he has not been briefed on them, and that's true. According to this chart, he's near the bottom of the list, so he has no need to know on a number of these deeper black programs. RDT&E.
It would be better if we went inside.
We can go inside, yeah.
Because it's gotten so loud
it's gotten
here.
Loud.
So, Michael, let's continue on.
Okay, Carrie. It's important that we consider this document here. This is RD&E Programs R1. That stands for Research, Development, Test, and Evaluation Programs R1.
Okay, can I get you to angle yourself
Yes,
a little?
sure.
Yeah, this way. Exactly it. That would be better.
And what this document shows you is the program element number line items for a number of classified programs. And so the bottom line here, Carrie, is that if you take the total amount from the knowns, what you're left with are the unknowns, or the black programs. And so this is the document that you can request from the Library of Congress, which is in back of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And this is the document that tracks the different programs within the Department of Defense that we have paid for with our own tax dollars. So that's important to note on that. B-2 stealth bomber, YF-23, there's a whole side story why the YF-23 did not win the contract for the advanced technology fighter. We know the F-22 won out. Over here we've got the original sketch on the Manta Ray. This is the McDonnell Douglas Teledyne Ryan Northrop as the prime contractor, a single seat, very low radar cross-section aircraft used as a reconnaissance aircraft. This was used in conjunction with F-117A stealth fighters during Desert Storm. This is the original sketch by Mark McCandlish, who is the foremost premier aerospace illustrator in the world. He is by far the best of the best, without a doubt.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear.
Now, this aircraft was carrier capable, so it could be launched from an aircraft carrier. I spoke to a number of bandits. Now, bandits is the actual designation for F-117 pilots. They're called bandits, and I spoke to about 4 of them, and I knew that around 1983 this aircraft was in the same hangar as the F-117As at Tonopah Test Range, also known as TTR. So I called these gentlemen and I told them who I was, aviation historian, was looking for some additional information, and I asked them what was it like when these aircraft were stored in the exact same hangar as the F-117s, and at least 3 of them said, you know, I can't talk about that. So right there, that was kind of an unacknowledged confirmation that that bird exists. I mean, there is such an aircraft that has not been declassified. Absolutely.
Fabulous.
We have the actual Teledyne Ryan patent on their version right here. You can see it's a single pilot aircraft, kind of a two-piece canopy. Some of these had a two-seat tandem arrangement, twin vertical stabilizers, canted about 15 degrees from the vertical axis. So again, we've got the actual patents for that. Here is what my good friend Steve Douglas saw during a roving sands red flag operation. He caught about 4 seconds of what this aircraft looked like. Could have been another variant of the manta ray. Now, this is the first time this has ever been seen by the general public. I spent about a year getting this photograph. The Air Force refused to declassify this. This is called the Task Vantage, also known as the Sneaky Pete. If you look here on the port side of the vehicle, there's a designation there. It's called Sneaky Pete. This was the forerunner of today's UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles. So it could be flown remotely, but with a pilot backup. I had to get this directly from the contractor. Air Force refused to declassify it. It looks like a standard long easy, but it's not. So that's the Task Vantage Sneaky Pete. This is the aircraft that Steve Douglas had seen. This is his original sketch, published in Popular Science magazine. So we've
now,
got,
who is Steve Douglas?
Steve Douglas is another aircraft researcher who has actually gone to a number of these red flag operations and who has actually recorded on videotape a black aircraft being flown, and these are just a couple of frames from his actual film. He has seen these with his own eyes. So there is a bird out there that is absolutely unacknowledged. Now we move on to the different version of what's known as the TR-3A Black Manta. We've got something called the M151 TAV, also known as Brilliant Buzzard, a two-stage to orbit space plane that we'll be considering here. Air Force pilot Lieutenant General Robert Bond died April 26, 1984. It has never, repeat, never been explained exactly what killed Robert Bond. Now, there's articles that talk about how he was flying a MiG-23 and he had a seat ejection type malfunction and he was hit in the head, which killed him. However, I've spoken to Buzz Carpenter, who was the lead investigator on this crash retrieval. He would not tell me what the aircraft was, and he was the gentleman in charge of the Air Force Declassification and Review Board, Bolling Air Force Base. He said it was not a MiG-23, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. So the whole story behind General Robert Bond has not been told as of right now. As of right now. Every year in October in Lancaster, California, they have something called the Gathering of Eagles. Out of the black and into the blue. So this is the lineage of black aircraft pilots who have flown a number of these classified aircraft. Now they get a plaque at this meeting, but the plaque is blank. There's just nothing describing it. It says, thank you for your service to this country, and you've protected our national security, but yet there's nothing on it that says what this gentleman did. So it does happen every October in Lancaster. That's not too far from Edwards Air Force Base. Here is the different fathers of stealth here with the Northrop B-2 stealth bomber. They had a recent meeting in January of last year. This is Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, where they got together and they talked about what it took to put the B-2 stealth bomber together. So it was a very interesting meeting.
Can you name these individuals?
This is Irv Whalen right here. I don't recall. I think that's Mr. Cassina. I don't recall who these other two over here, but I do know for a fact that that is Irv Whalen, and he was pretty much the senior project design engineer for the B-2 stealth bomber program.
Okay.
Okay. Paul Metz, senior lead pilot, test pilot for Northrop, who has gone on to fly for Lockheed. He, above almost anyone else, has flown a number of black budget aircraft. This is the YF-23, certainly a white rail program, but Paul Metz, just to put for the record, this gentleman has definitely flown a number of black program aircraft. He is definitely right up there at the very top. Very good test pilot. Joseph Lanny. We need to spend just a minute on Joseph Lanny. He currently works at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio, and this is a good shot of him here. Now, I was able to secure his official pilot biography. This is the link, which is no longer active, but this is an actual pilot biography from the Edwards Air Force Base website, so it's official. And if you look at this biography, it talks about his education, it talks about his assignments here, and then if you move over, it says here, flight information, okay, ratings, talks about hours, he's got more than 4,300 hours total time, and then look very carefully here. It says aircraft flown include, okay, we've got the F4, we've got the F5, we've got the F-15, the F-16, the F-14, moving down, boom, YF-24. What is the YF-24? We don't know. We absolutely do not know. Now, the Air Force is saying that he has flown it, but the YF-24 has never been acknowledged. It is a deep black program, never been acknowledged. So we know that that bird really does exist.
Okay, can I get another shot of him?
Yes, go right ahead.
Just
Joseph Lanny.
This picture seems
There
a
he
little
is.
bit better.
Colonel Joseph Lanny.
And he's still out there, right?
He is still out there. Yes, he is still out there. Absolutely.
But he might be a bit older.
No, he's still a very active person within the Air Force. So.
Oh, okay. And now, do you know any of these people?
I've spoke to.
Or are you at liberty to say you know them?
Sure, I'm all about pushing the envelope. I'm all about rocking the boat, pushing buttons, causing controversy. It doesn't do any good to be conservative, so I'm going for broke, and I'm fully prepared to go down with the ship with this research. Absolutely.
Okay. And so you are saying you know some of these people?
I do know some of them, and some of them have mentioned a few things. However, in point of fact, one of them, Dennis Bones Sager, has flown something called the YF-113G. This is a true story. We have it from his gathering of stealth meeting. He's flown something called the YF-113G. So I called him on the phone in Ohio. He works at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I said, such and such, Mister, I realize that you've flown this aircraft. Could you please provide a rough pencil sketch? He refused to discuss it. So it was a true account.
Okay, is that person in one of these photographs?
Yes, I do have a photograph of him. This is an interesting one here. La Crosse Tribune. Okay.
Do you want to put him on the camera or not?
Sure.
Okay, so which one would this?
He's in back here.
Oh, okay, we haven't gotten there yet. Okay.
Parents don't know what pilot's son did, but it was fantastic. So again, here's another report of this pilot who has flown black programs, and it's talked about in this article here, but the parents don't even know what he's flown. He's not allowed to talk about the aircraft that he's flown. Again, we've already considered the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Air Material Command insignia.
Now, have you put this, I mean, are you able to make a book out of your work?
Well, I've made all this information available to the general public through slide presentations, PowerPoint presentations, different lectures, and everything that I've done has been completely above board. I've tracked my sources.
What about an actual book published?
I've put together a kind of a booklet, but I don't really have a published book from a legitimate publisher, you could say. I'm just more interested in getting it out there. You know, kind of we're all working on a shoestring budget here, so no one has a $25,000 advance to get something like this. This is all done on a real shoestring budget. So.
Okay, I see.
Right,
okay, well, you've definitely got actually more than one book here, I think.
So now we're moving on to the Lockheed CL 1980. This was the procurement funding for this particular program that was under the direction of Ben Rich at the Skunk Works. This is vintage 1973. This is a competitor to the Grumman F-14, and they lost the contract. So there was something called Lockheed CL 1980. Kind of looked like an F-16 and an SR-71 blended together.
Is it possible that when they say they lost a contract that they might have actually got the contract but that went black?
That's certainly possible. I don't think that's the case for this one, but yes, absolutely. When you hear this talk about, oh, well, the X-30 space plane, Reagan's Oriental Express, we didn't have the funding for it, so we canceled it. Well, don't think so. You know, there's more to the story than
right. Or when they say they're retiring something early, it actually could be go black.
Now, Project Convair General Dynamics Fish, okay? That stands for First Invisible Super Hustler, vintage June 1959. Now this was the actual 3-view drawing for what was going to be America's frontline reconnaissance aircraft, Project Fish. You can see here that this is a highly swept delta wing configuration with a single pilot that sat just left of the center line. This is a twin-engine ramjet powered reconnaissance aircraft, Mach 4.1 at 90,000 feet. Very, very high performance aircraft. They did lose the contract. Now, if Lockheed did not get that contract, this would have been it. This absolutely would have been America's reconnaissance aircraft. Again, you can see there's two.
Okay, and when you say, I mean, I'm sorry to be so dumb, but reconnaissance, meaning
yes,
survey?
Meaning that we want to see real-time what's going on over our enemy's target, over Vietnam, over whatever area that we want to view. Somewhere we want to look at within 3 hours, we can get something over the target, depending on where this is based.
So will this should in theory have stealth capability, and should also have a lot of very sophisticated cameras on board?
That's correct. That's correct. And you'll see right here it says Air Data Package, Electronics Bay, Reconnaissance Equipment Capsule, right in here in the nose of the aircraft. So yes, when you're flying at approximately Mach 4.1 at 90,000 feet, it's very unlikely that someone's going to intercept this aircraft. Very unlikely. So that's the level of technology.
How many thousand feet?
About 90,000 feet.
Okay, and what is your average passenger
35,000 feet.
Okay.
Above twice that distance.
Interesting. Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
Very interesting, yeah.
So here's a really good illustration showing how this aircraft was going to be airdropped from the belly of a B-58. Original primary contractors, this is their actual illustration. So that's the B-58 Hustler. This is the aircraft being connected to the belly of the vehicle.
Interesting. So they wouldn't even launch it from the ground?
No, it can't really do that because you have to get these ramjet engines going up pretty quick before they'll actually kick in. Now this is something that we definitely need to consider, the date here. This is September 26, 1994, RAF Boscombe Down. Now this has never been talked about within American press. They've never even mentioned it. Something happened to one of our birds, one of our stealth aircraft at RAF Boscombe Down back in 1994. We believe, according to this article, that this was a 2-seat aircraft. They sat tandem. On the application of military power, there was a nose gear collapse, okay? And they actually towed this aircraft back to the hangar that you see right here. There was a tarp on the midsection of the vehicle. The forward and aft section were still exposed. So this is what directly from the eyewitnesses who reported seeing this. The very same night, they flew in a C-5 Galaxy from Palmdale. It was loaded into the C-5, and then the next night, it was flown back to Air Force Plant 42 Palmdale. Never been talked about in American press. Something that looked just like the YF-23, but in this case, and this illustration is actually incorrect, it had twin inward canted vertical stabilizers, 75-degree swept wing configuration.
Okay.
So this is RAF Boscombe Down. Now we believe that it's called the Northrop Astra Air Vehicle 6, U.S. Air Force, serial number 90-2414. This is what we believe the aircraft actually looks like. Now this is another craft that has not been talked about.
So Boscombe Down,
yes.
Isn't that in England?
That's correct.
And so what are they saying? That it crashed, or it didn't crash, or they don't know?
It had some kind of a nose gear malfunction. They towed it back to the local hangar there. They covered it up with a tarp, but there were people around that saw this happen. There were eyewitnesses.
And you're saying that this is a black?
It's believed that this is one of our top secret. This may be the YF-24 that Joseph Lanny had found. We don't know. We just don't know. But we've got the article that talks about it. So it's interesting.
Okay.
Boeing Softocrat. I got this from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base library. This has never been talked about as far as I'm concerned. This is a 36-troop VTOL troop transport. But if you look at this interesting document here, In the aft section of this vehicle, they're loading a Humvee. This is a low radar cross-section troop transport with vertical takeoff and landing capability. It says here, range and wind tunnel tested. Okay, so at the very least, we have something called Boeing Softicrad, either flying now in the field or it was flown in a wind tunnel. So it went more than just a paper study.
Okay.
Yes.
And so what would be the capability, if you're saying a troop transport, how many
Well, in this
people?
illustration, they've got 36 troops right inside the aircraft, and it takes off vertically. So if you wanted to get to Afghanistan and you wanted to have a rapid response where you could bring troops in there without anybody knowing, this is the aircraft you would use.
I see.
This is the aircraft you would use, absolutely.
So meaning 36 individuals?
36 fully armed troops could go in here.
Okay.
And they could land. It's very quiet. You exit, you egress the aircraft, this thing takes off, they do the mission, this thing comes back, picks them up, and they're out of there. And no one even knows what hit them.
Okay. What are these round, what are they?
These are lifting duct fans.
Oh.
These things will go up vertically. So
I see.
Yeah, this aircraft will land vertically like a helicopter. Now this is a good picture of Jack Pickett, who is no longer with us, but he was the NCO Club news publisher at MacDill Air Force Base. This is back September 1967. He was a World War II...
That's you, right?
Yep, that's me. Yep, he's a World War II combat veteran who was on a number of naval battleships in the Pacific Theater. And it turns out that he was going down the perimeter road at MacDill Air Force Base, which is near Tampa, Florida, and they were going down this perimeter road that you see right here, and when they got to this area right here with the arrow, this is the base scrapyard, Jack Pickett saw 4 of the most amazing aircraft that he had ever seen in his life. It was just shocking. It was incredible. He could not believe what he was seeing. And so we actually have Jack's original sketch. This is dated 1982. Here is what he saw. This is a very rough sketch. There were 4 aircraft parked there at the base scrapyard measuring 20, 40, 70, and 116 feet in diameter. They all had tricycle landing gear. They all had control surfaces along the circumference of the disc. Now you look here, this is the 20-foot craft, had a single pilot, air intake on either side of the pilot's compartment. We'll switch over to the AutoCAD drawing. You can see here the pilot's compartment was located dead center on the disc. It tapered back to a very high vertical stabilizer. Now, they had tested these. This was an actual U.S. Air Force flying saucer program, and the reason why they were scrapping these at the base scrapyard is because this particular model suffered from stability problems, and so they were scrapping it. They were scrapping it. Now, over here we have the larger 116-foot craft. This had a crew of 5 to 7. It was used as a long-range reconnaissance bomber during the Cold War. There was a series of bomb bays on the lower section of this vehicle, and when Jack walked under this craft, he tried to touch the lower surface of the vehicle with his hand, and he couldn't. So this thing was standing 12 feet off the tarmac near the scrapyard there, and he could not even touch the bottom of it. He said that he could see the seams of the bomb bay, but they were not open. It was closed. And they could use radio-controlled air-launched drones for different bombing missions. So this is like the forerunner of our smart bombs that we use in Desert Storm. We already had this back in 1955, 1960. We already had it.
Okay, but when you're saying he walked under it, what
Yes.
is it being propped up by?
It was on its own landing gear.
Okay,
all three were parked right on the base scrapyard with their own landing gear. They were parked right on their own landing gear.
I see.
What's interesting too, though, is he said that the port main landing gear on this large craft was partially collapsed, so the whole thing was tilted to about a 10-degree angle to the left. So I thought that was interesting. Now, this is a computer-generated forensic composite illustration just showing you what this aircraft actually looks like. You know, so I want to be upfront and honest with everybody that this is not an actual photograph, but this has been verified and vetted by Jack Pickett as the most accurate rendition of what he saw since he saw the actual aircraft back in 1967. So I put this flyer together. I put together a historical legacy of the story itself and sent them out all around the world, trying to get feedback, additional people who are perhaps knowledgeable, who even worked on the program.
And how did that go?
It went pretty good. I found others who were involved. Again, here is the 11 by 17 drawing of the large 116-foot long-range reconnaissance bomb.
Now, when it says top secret, is that
well,
meaning it used to be top secret?
It used to be top secret, and then when Jack Pickett, who had wrote a story, so the background of this is Jack Pickett was giving a briefing. He was actually given the highest security classification to a civilian at that time at MacDill Air Force Base. And so he was just absolutely astounded by what he was seeing. So he was given a briefing by the general at MacDill Air Force Base at a secure, quote, armed guard library facility at the base, right there, at an armed guard security. And he said, why don't you come up here and I'll show you something. So this general proceeded to open up this file drawer, and on a gigantic conference table that was 16 feet long, about 5 feet wide, he started laying out literally hundreds of officially stamped Air Force photographs of these aircraft in flight, on the tarmac, parked in the hangars.
Man.
Yes, the real bombshell evidence that we've all been searching for. It was there, and it may still be there. So Jack was looking at all this, and he said, this is just incredible. May I write a story, because you guys are declassifying this bird at the scrapyard. Can I write a story about these aircraft for our October issue of the NCO Club newsletter? He said, yes, you're welcome to. So Jack picked out 16 officially stamped photographs of these aircraft in flight. And to make a very long story short, the very day before they were going to go to press, and you can tell where this is leading, there was an aircraft that took off from Avon Park, that's east of Tampa. It was a more advanced VTOL, or vertical takeoff and landing version of this aircraft, okay? Keep in mind, these are horizontal takeoff jet disc aircraft. They have to roll down the runway. They cannot take off vertically. Something took off from Avon Park. They had a propulsion system malfunction. It dropped down to treetop level, flew over downtown Miami at night. Very high airspeed, low altitude. The next morning, it was all over the news. It was on the Tampa Tribune, the newspapers, everywhere. And Jack Pickett picked up the Sunday Tampa Tribune, brought it into the general's office and said, sir, I think we've got a problem here, because on one side, we're getting ready to release this aircraft that the Air Force is declassifying at the scrapyard with my story, Flying Saucers for Real, exclamation point, that I just wrote with your pictures. And then on the other side, you are denying the existence of this aircraft that just flew over Miami. What do you want to do about it? So the general excused himself. He contacted the Department of Defense, the Secretary of the Air Force, the head of Nebraska, and it was in the interest of the Air Force to delay publication, and that's where this story died back in 1967. Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska, he contacted, and so that's where this story died.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's because I've got a recent whistleblower that's from Space Command.
Excellent.
That maybe you should be talking to that guy.
Excellent. Yeah, there were others involved.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. So again, here we have the computer-generated forensic composite illustration showing the 40 and the 116-foot craft.
So this man, obviously you've got a picture with him. He must have told you the story himself.
He did.
Okay.
I spent about 4 years going back and forth with Jack Pickett, writing letters, doing sketches, illustrations, diagrams, testimony, everything. I saved everything. I have all his original letters. I have my failures. I have all the things that he laughed at, okay? Because he was very intent on me getting this correct. And when I sent him a sketch, You know, he would keep it for one day. He would take a big pen with a red ink marker and write all over my drawings and say, "No, Mike, this is wrong. No, this is wrong. This is not how the gears work. This is not how the canopy was. You're wrong, and you had better get it right." And he was about to lose it with me because he was upset that I was trying my best to get this thing. Well, he finally signed off on it. He finally signed off on it, and that's the drawing that I showed you. So we have his story absolutely, completely covered in this case.
Okay, but are you, in other words, what I'm curious is, are you the one that has that story, but no one else does at this point?
Honestly, I've saved everything from Jack Pickett. Other people are aware of this story because I've been giving presentations about this. I'm trying to get this out within the public domain.
Okay.
And others have come forward.
Now, is he still alive?
Jack Pickett is no longer with us. No longer with us. He died in 2008. But luckily, we have his story. Absolutely. It was featured on a History Channel documentary that we did together. So it was great that we finally got it out. Here is the aircraft being towed at the dry lake bed, Edwards Air Force Base. Very similar to what it actually looked like.
Right.
Here we have a shot of the 116-foot craft with the... Now you'll notice here, there's bogies, okay? These are called bogies, similar to the 747. There are 6 for the main, and believe it or not, there are 36 wheels up front. Very, very unusual, and a lot of people have criticized that this can't be true because this landing gear configuration is completely wrong. Well, that's how it was, and so this is exactly how we have stayed true.
And you have that documented from
Yes, I have Jack Pickett's original sketch talking about the nose gear of the vehicle.
I see.
That was one of the definitive factors of the aircraft.
What was the point in having that many?
Good question. There's a number of reasons. Because it carried a lot of cargo for the bombing missions, the air-launched radio-controlled drones. It also had provisions for fuel, and it may have been associated with the NEPA program. That's 1955 to 1960, the Nuclear Energy for Propulsion of Aircraft. And one reason why it needs such robust landing gear is the nuclear shielding, okay? We've all heard about atomic bombers and nuclear-powered spacecraft. That was between 1950, by 1960, any information regarding atomic power, nuclear-powered spacecraft was expunged from the aerospace literature, okay? So it's clear that by 1960, they made a breakthrough in this technology. Now, put that together with what we know about Neil Armstrong. This is 9 years before Apollo 11. Is this one reason why Neil won't talk about Apollo 11? Because some of these birds were flying way before he got there, and they have exo-atmospheric capabilities?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. You're alluding to the fact that it may go outside the perimeter of the planet.
Absolutely. Now,
how far?
Well, that's a good question. Jack was astounded when he saw all this, and these were jet-powered discs that may have a secondary propulsion system. So he asked the General, what is the performance specifications of these aircraft? And this general told Jack Pickett, quote, "These aircraft could fly so fast as to attain sufficient altitude to be classified as achieving space flight," end quote. That's a direct quote. So think about that. When you get past 50 miles, you are in space. That's the official designation for space flight. But if you have an aircraft that's jet-powered, when you get up to 95,000 feet, 100,000 feet, starting to get into 200,000 feet, they'll flame out. Jet engines will flame out. So by default, this aircraft must have had something else going on with it. And that may be the NEPA program that we've heard so much about.
Okay, I guess I won't push the matter, but I am curious, why does the landing gear have anything to do with the propulsion system?
The landing gear, the only connection between the landing gear and the propulsion system is if this was an original kind of pre-prototype version of the aircraft that took off from Avon Park, and if it was using some type of a nuclear propulsion system that needed shielding for the pilots, that shielding would be very heavy, and in order to distribute that load, you would need a massive landing gear.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. That's why. That's exactly why. Now this is the underbelly section of the large 116-foot craft. there are 4 exhaust ports at the lower aft end of the vehicle. So this is the large one with F-86 swept wing jet fighter interceptor flying as chase for this particular aircraft. Here it is taking off on takeoff roll at Edwards Air Force Base with an F-84 Thunderjet.
But this is not real.
No, these are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations. We did a whole series of illustrations just to show people what this aircraft actually looked like. Here is the proposed day that I'm hoping for, the day when this aircraft is officially acknowledged. This is the declassification ceremony inside the hangar at Edwards Air Force Base, and hopefully someday soon this bird will take its rightful place in the Air Force Museum, Dayton, Ohio. So we're waiting for this day.
Okay, how many people could fit inside there?
Single pilot.
That's
single
it?
Pilot. For the 40-foot and 20-foot, it was single pilot.
Oh.
The 70-foot had a crew of 2 that sat tandem. But this was the single pilot version here. Again, you can see a good shot of the landing gear and your typical flying saucer with this huge vertical tail at the back in flight over Edwards Air Force Base, and you can see that there are 2 air intakes on both sides of the pilot's compartment. Another shot of Edwards Air Force Base, and we have finally put this aircraft into production as a model now. So it is available as a model. We're further getting the word out. And this is what the model looks like right here.
Okay, when you say as a model, is this something that you
This is
sell
a plastic model that you can buy and you can put it together, and was finally able to get that going. So now a lot of people think, well, you know, we've only got Jack Pickett's testimony, that's not much to go on. Well, I finally tracked down another gentleman who was associated with this program. This is Warren Botts. He is a Air Force pilot who, this is inside his house, here's his certificates. He flew everything from the P-40 all the way up to the F-104 Mach 2 aircraft. And he was at a reunion of the Flying Tigers. This is Warren Botts. A reunion of the Flying Tigers back in 1966 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And if you'll see over here, this is the hangar that they went to. Now keep in mind, the Air Force Museum is over here outside this picture. They were bused across the base. The wives were with them. And Roosevelt's DC-4 was in this hangar right here. There's a connecting doorway that connects all these hangars. This is hangar number 4, Bay E. It has 5 bays. That's A, B, C, D, and E. Now, when Warren, who had an inquisitive mind, started going through this connecting doorway, he walked into this last hangar, and to his shock and surprise, he saw parked nose first in the hangar the exact same aircraft that Jack Pickett had seen 1 year later. So I had secondary independent confirmation that this bird actually existed. This is the hangar that he saw that aircraft in, forward view, head on. This is Warren Botts' original letter describing what that actually looked like. And I'll just read this last sentence right here. It says, now keep in mind, he walked in the hangar, this armed guard was there, and he said, he was very nice about the incident, and after showing my ID, advised me I was not permitted in this restricted area, so I left still looking back at this, quote, monster. Okay, yeah, if you had a 116-foot diameter craft that was in this hangar, you would call it a monster. That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. So we've got Warren Botts' testimony. Now, this is extremely important. Not people know the story about this. Project Silverbug was actually declassified by Jack Pickett. This is the actual declassification from Jim McAndrew for Project Silverbug. Actually took place in 1995, where he actually got it declassified. Project Silverbug was a flat vertical takeoff supersonic gyroplane. They were somewhat using the Coanda effect. But here you can see the cutaway here. This is the 3-view drawing of Project Silverbug. Avro Project from Canada at that time. This was going to be a Mach 3 interceptor, but allegedly they never built this aircraft. So the bottom line is that when Jack Pickett tried to get the aircraft that he saw at MacDill Air Force Base declassified, the Air Force pulled a switcheroo on Jack Pickett and declassified Project Silverbug instead. Okay?
Wow.
And that is the story behind Project Silverbug. That's how he got this declassified. And so yet the aircraft at MacDill have still never come
Okay,
out.
does the aircraft at MacDill have a name or no?
We don't know the
We just don't
designation.
know.
We just don't know what it was called. Probably it was called Project Ladybug. We don't know, but that may be one of the designations.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left on this
Okay.
tape. I didn't know we were doing this interview. I am not as prepared as I would like to be. I think that you wanted to be careful on the phone, whatever.
Sure.
I've got another tape. I'm going to put in the camera, and I'm going to hope for the best. Okay.
Okay.
But I just want to say that right here, and Michael, if we have any issues with recording what comes after this, then I want to thank you very much from Project
Thank you,
Camelot,
Carrie.
and I would like to arrange to do a formal interview with
Great.
you. Take some time, have some proper lighting and a quiet background.
Great.
But I would also like to invite you on my radio program.
Thank you, Carrie.
Okay. So hold on 1 minute here. And